All right, fine. I'll be a gracious host. How you doing?
Little Mermaid is the scariest Disney movie by far, though.
Why the hell is Ace Blade in your Kickstarter?
Some comics. I'm getting controversial today. We're gonna get controversial today with.
My proudest moment is this interview and being able to talk to you two.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Taurus Comics, in collaboration with Fourth Wall Productions, respectfully brings to you the 79th episode of the Four Tales podcast. I am your host, Kyron Silva from Taurus Comics. Across the way is the pomegranate playwright of Ace Blade, Danny J. Quick, and together we are your two award-winning blurred comic creators here to help you find your next favorite comic. We are live on the Age to Geekdom network via Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. So if you are listening or watching us live, thank you for your support. But don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and review this podcast because all your positive reviews and interactions help us reach a bigger audience. And if you want to financially support us, you can go to our website, buy us some merchandise, buy us coffee. Or if you're a gamer, you can go to w.gg, use our code 4TALES, that's the number 4, TALES, and get 10% off your order. So, there you go. Danny J. Quick, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I like that little addition to the intro there, sir.
Which one? I have a lot now.
All of it.
Okay.
All of it, especially. I don't know if people could tell, but we got our first sponsor for the Four Tales podcast, and I'm excited about it. So yeah. I'm actually about to go. Can I use our own discount? Can I use our own code?
Yes, you can.
Okay, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do.
All right.
How you been doing, man?
I'm doing all right. Javon's in the building. Good morning, Javon. I know I saw Fish Lee earlier was asking some questions, so good morning, Fish. But I'm all right.
Good morning.
Yeah, I'm tired though.
Tired. See? Come on now.
I'm tired.
Come on now with the yawning.
All right.
You been reading any comic books lately?
I have. And I am disappointed in myself. I have not read this book earlier. But I started reading for Father's Day. I got the Tom Taylor Nightwing series.
Oh.
And I'm a big Nightwing fan just in general. And I don't know why I did not buy this earlier, but it is freaking fantastic, dude.
Now I'm gonna have to pick it up. Is it in trade yet?
Yes.
Okay. It is. Definitely gonna have to check that out. I'm not as huge a fan of Nightwing as some, but I like Nightwing. I can get with Nightwing.
Okay, who's your favorite Batman family character? That's not Batman.
I like Damian.
I'm
a Damian Wayne guy. I like the attitude. I like Damian.
All right, that fits for you for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know why, dude. That fits a lot for you. Now that I know you, that fits pretty well.
Yeah, I like the attitude.
And Javon is right. Danny has no taste, which is, that's we all knew that by now.
We don't all have to like the same things as our esteemed guest today will probably tell us. But I've been reading some indie stuff. I got last weekend I was at Heroes Con in Charlotte, North Carolina. I picked up this book called Derelicts.
Okay.
Which is a pretty good looking book by Glenn Urrieta, and then The Revenant by our guest last week, Daryl Murphy.
Which I do want to say, great job on that interview. I know that was your first interview in person like that, so that was a good job, man.
I was nervous, but it was fun. So got to do more on location stuff like that.
Definitely. Well, let's bring our guest on, and because I am really wanting to find out who his favorite non-Batman Bat Family person is. So let's bring him on. We have the amazing Ron Marz on the show today, writer for Marvel, DC, CrossGen, Star Wars. I mean, if there's been a comic company that's not my own comic company, he's probably written for it at this point. So
I think I heard him say one time that the only comic book company he hasn't wrote for was Boom at the time, Boom Studios, maybe. Is that still the case, Mr. Marz?
That's still true.
Still true. Yeah.
Okay. So how do we get you on Boom Studios at this point?
I don't know. I think you have to invent more hours in the day is
Okay.
is really what we need to do. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good
Thanks for
morning.
having me.
Thank you for being on. I do want to start off with probably the most important question that you're going to hear from us today, because you've been doing comics for a long time, and I need to know, what is it like working with my best friend Ron Lim? Like, what is that like?
Um, at the current time, it's like going back home again because he was the guy that I worked with first in my career, first artist that ever set pencil to paper for one of my scripts.
Oh, man. Look at
So he's just the happiest guy in the world. He's
that. He really is.
he's such a charming, happy dude. And creatively, so we're buddies. That helps. That's a big part of it. But creatively, he's just such a solid storyteller and professional that I know whatever I give him is going to come back looking amazing, and looking like a comic book should look. It's very much it's very much a partnership. I trust him, he trusts me. It's still a delight whenever his pages show up in my inbox like they did this week.
I love it. That's a underrated part of the creation journey when you are working with somebody that you can trust to do the things the way that they're supposed to be done, or their way which fits the job. I know.
Yeah,
We
it's not even the way that they're supposed to be done. It's just I always liken a creative team, writer, penciler, inker, or just artist, colorist, letterer, editor, to a basketball team or a jazz quartet or quintet, where everybody does what they do. They do their thing. The bass player, and the drummer and the saxophone player are all doing a different thing, but the different thing that they do all goes into the the same thing that they're the same package, the same project.
Right.
So when you trust the person that's next to you doing their thing, this is magic. This is that's where the alchemy of all this comes in. So yeah, trust is great, but also just you do the thing that you do, and I'll stand here and watch you. And then at the end of it, we're all pulling together to make the same thing. It's a tremendous. I don't think you get that sort of sense of collaboration out of anything else creatively that I've done. I mean, I've worked on video games and television, all that, and that's a lot more people involved. That's a much bigger cast, and those are all satisfying too. But because a comic book creative team is so small, and the thing that you do is so specific and kind of instant gratification too. I mean, we finished the issue, and 2 months later, you guys are reading it. So there's just something kind of magic about having everybody on the team doing their thing, pulling in the same direction, and then you wind up with the book that comes out.
I like that analogy of connecting a comic book to just basically any type of sports team, because it does feel like if you have an issue with somebody on the team, that book is not going to be as good as it can be. So I like that. I like that a lot there.
Yeah, it's everybody has to do their thing, right? I'm a Mets fan, and my guys, not everybody's
I'm
doing
sorry.
their thing right now. So if one link in that chain isn't working, the whole thing falls apart. And I've certainly worked on comics where it's not that somebody wasn't good at their job, but they just didn't click with that project or with the team or whatever, and you wind up with something that's not quite what you want it to be. But when everybody works, when everybody's clicking, and when everybody's sort of when everybody's passing the ball properly, waiting for that backdoor cut, this is great. This is the best thing you can do.
Right. I agree with you. And I think I heard you talk before about a run of Thor that you did that you had issues with back in the day. But I want to go back to way back before that. Well, not way back before that, a couple of years back to when you first got into comic books and how you got into comic book writing and your introduction into comics as a whole. Like, were you a fan of a certain comic book before you started writing, or just jumped in head first?
I was just a fan of comics in general. I went through the thing that most of us go through, which is you read comics as a kid, 8, 9, 10 years old, and then you decide, well, I'm mature now. I don't need comics. These comics are for kids. You hit 13, 14 or whatever, and you put those aside, which is what happened to me. And then I was a senior in high school, and I just kind of rediscovered comics on the spinner rack at the local convenience store, and it was specifically Walt Simonson Thor and Frank Miller Daredevil that jumped off the rack at me, and I went, "Oh, this is different than I remember."
Mm-hmm.
And then just kind of got drawn back into it, and got pretty serious about pursuing reading books that I get my hands on, then discovering that there was such a thing as a comic book shop a few towns over, because I didn't know that existed when I was a kid. And I started to read independent books like Nexus and American Flag, stuff from First Comics, Grendel from Kamiko. And then, not long after I graduated from college, I was working as a journalist at a local newspaper, and part of my social group was the comics community in my area in upstate New York. Jim Starlin, Bernie Wrightson, Terry Austin, Joe Staten, Fred Hembeck, Dan Green, like that whole group that was up here, in the Mid-Hudson Valley. And Jim is the one who kind of took me by the hand and said, "Hey, do you want to write comics?" And my usual line is, "Well, yeah." It's like somebody asking if you want to play center field for the Yankees. You're like, "Yeah, I do," but nobody gets a chance to do that. But when Jim Starlin says, "Do you want to write comics?" you actually get to write comics. So Jim is the one who showed me how to do this. Jim was the one who sort of basically said, "Oh, you can do this. You get it. Like you understand how this works." Co-wrote my first few jobs with me at Marvel, Silver Surfer jobs specifically. And then not long after, he left the writing duties on Surfer to pursue the Infinity Gauntlet, which worked out pretty well for everybody involved. Made a few bucks from Marvel along the way.
Just a little bit of money.
$1 billion as a movie. And somehow Jim convinced them to turn the Monthly Surfer book over to me. So I have been literally writing comics ever since.
Now, were you nervous when you got that chance to take over Silver Surfer?
No, I should have been. But I was too excited to be nervous. I was too dumb to be nervous. I knew it was an opportunity, but I also kind of felt like, well, I can do this. I'm good at this. So I was, certainly I should have been nervous. I should have, I didn't realize the kind of opportunity that was in front of me, because this seemed like, oh, well, Jim said I should do this. So I'm doing this. Yeah. And it just, everything sort of fell into place for me. But in retrospect, now that I understand the business more and I understand the opportunity more, I look at it and just realize, oh my God, the sort of, gold-plated opportunity that was handed to me is just rarer than hen's teeth. This is, this was an amazing, because now people strive for 10 years just to get, a 8-page backup in a Marvel or DC anthology. So it seemed like, oh, I'm writing for Marvel Comics. That seemed like a natural thing for me at the time. But now I look back at it, and certainly the way that the industry has changed since then. I look back at it and realize that, oh my God, this was like getting a 2-out at bat in the World Series in the bottom of the ninth. This was sort of make or break the rest of your life kind of thing. So ultimately, I mean, thank God I didn't realize what sort of an opportunity it was. I just did it.
It's the joys of youth at that point.
Oh, totally. The joys and the enthusiasm to just, I can do, to just, jump out of the plane without a parachute.
Yeah.
All right. Now we do have a question in our audience from Fish Lee. He says, I have a question for Mr. Marz. What's the best part of getting to write for such amazing characters, and what's the worst part?
I mean, there honestly is no worst part. This is the best job in the world. The best part, honestly, the best part is I get to make up shit and they pay me for it. That's crazy, right? This is just, I don't really have a lot of other job skills, to tell you the truth, right? Like I can write, I can make stuff up, I can tell stories. I guess that's what it really comes down to, is I can tell stories. So, thank God this worked out, because otherwise I'd, probably still be a journalist at a daily newspaper, which is not exactly a growing industry these days.
Not at all.
So the best part is just, you get to play with, you either get to invent your own toys, which is awesome, do create your own stuff, and, sort of bring into existence a series that didn't exist before, characters and concepts and all that didn't exist. Or you get to play with these amazing toys that you read about when you were a kid. I'm writing Silver Surfer now again. And I can remember picking through a box of old tattered comics that belonged to my older brother in our basement. And the first appearance of Silver Surfer was in that box when I was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old, probably. I didn't really know anything. I just knew that the Kirby artwork sort of weirded me out, because it looked like creepy to my 5-year-old eyes, but I couldn't look away from it. So all these years later, that character that I looked at in old comics and didn't really understand, I'm getting to write him. I think I've actually written more Silver Surfer stories than anybody else, even Stan, which sort of boggles my mind. So
that's awesome. You brought up playing with toys, and it made me think of Green Lantern 50. So I wonder, and you also brought up you started out with Mr. Joe Staton, and he's the creator of Kilowog, is that, I believe, and I believe you killed you killed Kilowog there in that issue. So when stuff like that happens and you get to play with other people's toys, is that a conversation that you have with him, or do you just do it, or you ask for forgiveness and not listen, or is it something that came from the higher ups?
Well, it was the direction of Green Lantern when I took it over was dictated by DC.
Okay.
They, it wasn't like I came and said, you know what, we're going to get rid of Hal Jordan and I'm going to make up a new guy. How do you like that? That's not the way that works. If you're going to do something that drastic to a book, it's, it either comes from above, or you get, there's a bunch of meetings and you get permission. In that particular case, DC offered me the book. I dawdled for a week or two to decide whether I wanted to do it. I finally said yes, and then we were off and running because we didn't have a whole lot of time. The previous direction had already been solicited, so DC had to cancel those solicitations and do the new one with the new creative team. So in the case of Emerald Twilight, DC gave me a couple pages of outline of like, here's what we want this story to be. Wasn't really dictated, but it was like, here's the general flow of things that need to happen for us to get to, the point where we're going to launch a new Green Lantern. So Kilowog in particular wasn't mentioned in any way. He wasn't mentioned in detail, but I felt like if this, sort of the fall of Hal Jordan was going to mean something, and his sort of descent into madness was going to resonate, that I think in the outline it just said, Hal destroys the Green Lantern Corps. So how that actually happened was up to me, and I felt like, well, it's, if we're going to do this, it's got to hurt. It needs to be a tragedy. So I thought Kilowog was the, if somebody was going to get wiped out on camera, it needed to be Kilowog, because he had fans. He's sort of a beloved character. Emotionally, you needed to feel it. You needed to hurt. So it was my decision to pick him and show him getting blown away on panel.
I love it.
But I didn't ask Joe, and he didn't yell at me when I saw him. So
okay, that's good. I'm curious though, because I know that was one of those decisions that the fans, were not as happy about, at the time.
I wasn't when I read it.
but now, like, it's one of my favorite Green Lantern stories. Like, is there a, I don't know, like a satisfaction in knowing, years later that you wrote something that was truly impactful and that, added to the Green Lantern lore? Or you're like, the fans were just wrong back then, or how does that feel?
The fans aren't really ever wrong. You feel how you feel, and that's completely valid. We knew we were going to upset people. There was, and that was part of it. We knew we were going to get a lot of buzz by changing something in a comic. The sort of the classic reaction that you expect from fans is, the fans say, nothing ever changes. It's the same all the time. Why don't you change something? And then when you change something, everybody goes, well, what the hell? Why'd you change that? And you also understand that the vast, you never hear from the vast majority of fans, right? It's just like politics, right? It's the extreme end of either side of the spectrum. So the rabid Hal fans that wanted me fired and, started a group to get me, to make sure I couldn't feed my family. We heard a lot from them, and we heard a lot from people who love the new direction. Everybody in the middle who was just like, let me read this story and see what happens. People read the comic and move on with their lives. Yeah. So you can't take the really vociferous reactions from the hardcore fans either way, as representative of the whole. But certainly we knew that this was going to be a significant story in terms of reaction, because this isn't the sort of thing that was done very often. Obviously, the death of Superman was a big deal story, sold a lot of comics, but eventually, we were just back to business as usual. And the same thing with breaking up Batman. Batman's back got broken and he got better. Both of those storylines were a big deal for DC, big sort of landmarks in comics, where somebody else took over the main role in the book. This Emerald Twilight was very much the next kind of story in that vein, because DC realized that there was interest and frankly sales in that sort of stuff. But this one was going to be permanent. This was going to be, we're not going to bring the main character back. We're going to do a completely new direction. And that was predicated largely upon the fact that the sales of the Green Lantern franchise were pretty middling at the time. Very much split across a number of different books, but just none of the books were selling in the fashion that they should have been, or that they were, editorial wanted them to. So so the decision was made to, all right, we're gonna upset the apple cart, and we're not putting the apples back on the cart. We're just gonna make a new cart.
Nice. No, I mean, now you've of course written for DC, you've written for Marvel, Image, I think Dark Horse also. Out of all these places, is there still a character that you have not written that you want to?
Um, my usual answer for this is Tarzan, even though I have actually written Tarzan. But I think if I get one answer, it's I'd like to do a Tarzan monthly book, just because there's such a. I grew up on those stories. I grew up on the Edgar Rice Burroughs novels, as well as the Johnny Weissmuller movies when I was 6 or 7 years old on Sunday mornings on Channel 2 out of New York. So I always loved those stories, and I love the fact that the novels at least were sort of much more fantasy science fiction stories than just guy running around the jungle, lost Roman cities and dinosaurs in the Earth's core and all that kind of stuff. And the fact that Tarzan in comics has such an amazing pedigree. The Russ Manning stuff that was printed by Gold Key and Joe Kubert at DC, John Buscema at Marvel. So that's my usual answer. I also realize that Tarzan is a very pulp hero and probably not not very in fashion these days. So beyond Tarzan, the one hero that I've wanted to write in some form or fashion, haven't really had much of a chance, is Dr. Fate.
Okay.
I've always loved Dr. Fate. I got to mash them together with Doctor Strange for the Amalgam books, which is one of my favorite projects ever. But I've never had maybe I've thrown a line or two to Dr. Fate in a crossover somewhere, but I've always liked that the helmet and the Egyptian background and all that kind of stuff. So but virtually any character you put your hands on, you can I've at least been able to figure out a way that here's my way in, and here's how I'm interested in this. I subscribe to the point of view that there really aren't many bad characters. There's just characters you haven't figured out yet.
Yeah, I love that. When you were talking about the best and worst parts of comic book making comic books, my mind, I thought you were going to say social media, but I remember hearing you talk about kind of alluding to your social media being a garden, that you have to that you gotta kind of tailor to what you want to see. And I think that approach is very good, especially today when there's everybody has a platform, and like you just said, the loudest people want to be heard, and you don't want to stress yourself out with it, because it's not necessarily, you don't need it. You don't need social media. I mean, some of us need it, to sell books, but at the same time, if I got to deal with negativity all the time, it kind of doesn't make it worth it.
Well, it's my Twitter feed or Instagram or whatever. That's like you said, that's my garden, that's my house, and like I don't let people come into my yard or my house and poop on the floor, right? That's not how this works. So if you're going to try to do that, out you go. There's a 1 strike rule. You don't get 3 strikes, you just get 1. And look, there are people who just want to cause trouble, who are for whatever reasons. Look, everybody's got their baggage. But there are people who just show up to antagonize or see if they can get a reaction or whatever. And like you said, it's a garden. When the weeds spring up, you got to pull them out, or they continue to spread. And certainly, I do a lot of weeding. And last week I did a lot of weeding because I got a bunch of they were self-proclaimed Punisher fans, but I suspect most of them have never read a Punisher book in their life. They just were coming in to throw rocks. So,
Yeah.
as soon as I see you, you're gone, because that's, I enjoy social media because it connects, connects me to, well, to you guys, to anybody that, we have a common interest. We are all of the same tribe. I was talking about this I was at a show in New Mexico last weekend, and doesn't matter where you go or where I've been able to go in the world. I was in Alaska, and then a week later I was in Abu Dhabi, and then I was in Albuquerque, which I guess I'm just visiting places that begin with A. So,
Ron will be in Alaska pretty soon, then Argentina.
yeah, actually, I need to get to Argentina. But it's you're in these disparate places in the world, and you meet people that love what we love, right? That love comics, love this sort of genre material that we do in comics, and they are of your tribe, even though you don't even speak the same language, or at least you didn't learn the same language. Frankly, everybody in Abu Dhabi speaks English. So I just find that to be one of the delights of doing this for a living, is that you are able to go around the world, and you have shorthand with somebody that you've never even met before, that's grown up completely differently than you have. But because you love the same things, you are brothers already.
Now, the past couple months has been pretty exciting for you. I mean, you have the launch of the Fireflies TV series, Diablo 4, that you worked on also, and like you mentioned, you're coming out with a new Silver Surfer book. How are you able to balance all of these projects going on, which seems like almost all at the same time?
I don't sleep a lot.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's the unfortunate truth. Is I work for Blizzard, and then when that work is done, I start working on comics, and and when that work is done, I start working on being a script consultant for a TV show or whatever. It's it doesn't leave a lot of free time, other than sneaking out to play softball and play golf and stuff like that. But I like everything that I do. I'd like a little bit more time to read and a little bit more time to watch movies. But other than that, I'm not a homebody sitting on the couch, just watching endless hours of TV. I like to be busy, so I am busy. And certainly there are days when I go, oh man, I really do just want to sit on the couch. Today being one of those days, right? But I've got stuff to do. The next issue of Silver Surfer needs to be written, and I'm partway into it, and I've got some editing to do, and there's a couple projects that I'm working on that I can't tell you about because they're not announced yet.
No, you can tell us. It's okay. It's okay.
So
You can tell us.
Yeah, oddly, I might get a phone call from somebody that said, "Hey, what are you doing?" You dummy, shut up. It's particularly as a writer in this business, it's a constant state of juggling. You're working on different things at different times, and you're also stuff just happens where an idea occurs to you, a series or a story occurs to you, and you're just like, oh, well, shit, I gotta go pursue this now because this thing is stuck in my head. So I'm actually working on a story, a series with an artist that I've worked with before, and we're kind of smacking together the characters and the general story outline and all that kind of stuff, trading things back and forth. So it's I think when you're a writer, the nature of it is juggling. Less so when you're an artist, because the intensity of the time, you have to get that page done today, and you got to get tomorrow's page done tomorrow. You don't have a lot of time to juggle things, so you're kind of working on one thing at a time. But the nature of it being a writer is you're constantly doing it, and and stuff occurs to you when when I'm taking a shower or taking a walk around the lake that we live on, or um, the universe feeds you. The ideas come. Thankfully, they still come. So I've never gone. Oh, I don't have any ideas. I'm all full. I guess I'm all empty. So you just have to run with it. It's I guess in some ways it's a little bit of a curse, but um, I wouldn't have it any other way.
That artist isn't Daryl Banks, is it? Because I saw him last weekend and he was saying something similar. He said he had a project that he was working on with a writer that he worked with in the past, and they were throwing back and forth ideas. So
I can neither confirm nor deny nothing.
Okay.
because he wouldn't tell us what project he was working on either, and now I'm hearing it a second time. I don't know.
Well, I really can confirm or deny nothing. But part of this is that you find artists that you click with, because the artist is really your co-author. The artist is
Danny, the artist is a co-author. Danny,
Yeah,
sorry. I'm the artist on his book, so just
treat your artists like gold, my friend, because I do some teaching too. I teach some online courses for writing comics for the Jacob Kruger studio in Manhattan, and one of the thing I try to drill into all of the writers' brains is like, look, without the artist, there's no comic. So nobody wants to read our scripts. That's nobody shows up to a restaurant to read a recipe. All right, our scripts are basically recipes. People go to a restaurant for the meal. The meal is the finished product, and you can't have a meal without the artist. So what I was going to say is that I can write the same script and hand it to 3 different artists, and I wind up with 3 different stories. Because it's how it's interpreted. It's what they bring to the story that makes it differently. Writers who feel like the artist is just the vehicle for them to express their story are sorely mistaken. Writers who get a page back and go, oh well, this isn't how I was picturing it in my head. Well, if you wanted it how you pictured it in your head, you should draw it yourself.
You should have drew it yourself.
And
exactly.
And then the answer is always, oh well, I can't draw.
And there you go.
There you go.
There you go.
I want to say it was you that I heard
your own question.
I want to say it was you that I heard saying something about listing that comic book should list the artist's name first in comics, and then the rest of the team behind it, because the artist is such an important part of it is comics. Was that you, or am I giving somebody else?
Could have been. I mean, I don't disagree with that. The artist is the one who makes the story. I can, if I write a Shakespearean level script and they hand it to a lousy artist, at the end of the day, that's a lousy story, because it just doesn't work. Conversely, if I write a fairly middling story and they hand it to a genius, they hand it to Garcia Lopez and Kevin Nolan, that's a pretty damn good story at the end of the day.
Make it work.
You ride the coattails of the people that draw your story. That's the reality of comics. And if you don't like that reality, go write something else. Go write prose or 1-act plays or whatever. But the artistic collaboration is why you do this. If you're not interested in that collaboration, don't write comics, because that's what this is entirely about.
I love this wealth of love towards artists on this show. I think we should have Ron on every week just to hear him say how much he loves artists. I love this.
I agree with you. They're picking on me because I do have the conversation a lot, artist versus writer. It's a conversation, but I do agree that without art, there are no comic books. So, I'll give it to, you see Javon Stokes in the comments. He's a big proponent of that also, but he's an artist, so I'd like to give him a hard time. And Kyron also, but yes, I 100% agree with you.
So
Yeah,
we do
it's
want.
it's the, like you said, without an artist, there's no comic. Without a writer, there's still pictures on a page that tell a story. So that seems to me that by that definition, the artists are more important. They don't need us, right? We need them. They might need us to help tell a better story, or to polish the story, or collaborate on the story. But ultimately, an artist can do this job by themselves, and we
go. Yeah, Danny, I don't need you anymore. I'm gonna make my own comics.
I knew you didn't need me from the very beginning, to be honest with you. I just want to let you know that.
All right. No. Well, all right. So we've talked about your past. We talked about what you're working on, but I definitely want to get into a little bit before the show ends about your future. We know you're coming out with the Silver Surfer Rebirth Legacy series. Can you give us any information on that series, what it's about, things like that? Because I'm very interested as a Silver Surfer fan.
It's about 5 issues, and it's about Silver Surfer. Some of it I can't tell you because some of it sort of springs out of the end of the Warlock series that we're currently doing right now. We're not doing it right now, we're done with it, but the issues are still coming. I think issue 3 comes out this coming week. Yeah. And the 4 and 5 are done and in the can, so off to press. This really picks up from the end of it can stand alone if you didn't read the Warlock book, but hope you go back and read the Warlock book. But it will have Surfer in it. Obviously, it will have Janice Vell. It will have Thanos in it. I think that's a fairly obvious thing since we just revealed the Ron Lim variant cover, which has Thanos and Captain Marvel on it. The Marvel Captain Marvel. So other than that, I don't think we're revealing too much yet. It's gonna involve some time travel, and I'm getting to play with some different realities that maybe not even different time frames that you might have seen in Marvel Comics here and there. So in a larger sense, the first Surfer series that we did, the Warlock that's currently running now, and the current Surfer series are sort of thematically linked. You could sit down and read them all in one shot, and it would make sense as a whole, as a larger story arc.
Okay.
Which to be perfectly honest, we didn't know when we did Surfer Rebirth that there was going to be more, but it was successful enough and popular enough that Marvel came to us and went, "Hey, you guys are up for doing another one, right?" Okay, you can sort of tie this into a bigger story arc, right? Okay. Thinking, shit, I shouldn't have tied off all the loose ends in Surfer. But
Marvel didn't think putting Ron Marz and Ron Lim on a Silver Surfer series would be successful.
I don't think it's that they didn't think it would be successful. It's just, you never know. You put this stuff out into the market and you see what happens.
Well, I bought like 200 copies myself, so that's okay.
Well, awesome. You're the one keeping us going then.
Yeah.
And I think, hopefully that, people are enjoying seeing us together again. But hopefully beyond that, it's also a sense that they're getting a solid story that looks great. Every month we're having a ball doing it, and working with Ron is just, as we said when we started, it's just like putting on an old pair of jeans and a hoodie that fit just right. They feel good.
We do have one more question in our audience here. Javon says, do you favor cosmic stories more?
Not particularly. It's not like I, got into this and went, I must tell cosmic stories. I just like telling stories. And, whether it's cosmic stories or street level stuff like Batman and Daredevil, or mystery or horror or science fiction or historical fiction. I mean, I like all that stuff. I like everything that's on the buffet table. I don't want to eat just one dish. Cosmic stuff is cool and I love doing it, and I would certainly hope to do more. We're putting out Andy Lanning and I, who co-writes with me sometimes, put out a crowdfunded project on Zoop called Resolution, which is headed off to press now, finally. And that's very much a cosmic, it's sort of Green Lantern Corps meets Unforgiven kind of story. So when we had an opportunity to just make something up, we ended up making up a cosmic story because we both like that stuff. But the next time, the project that I mentioned earlier with an artist buddy, has science fiction tones, and it's set in the past, and it's got some weird interdimensional stuff. So it's, I just tell stories. I don't sit down to say, oh, I'm going to think of a cosmic story now. It's like working different muscles. You go to the gym and you do your pull day, and then you do your push day, and then you do leg day. I mean, you work all of that stuff. And that's how I look at the writing is I don't want to do just one kind of story. I don't just want to do superhero stories. Even I want to do everything across the board, because that allows me to stretch myself as a writer.
Excellent. So now it's time for my favorite part of the show, quick takes. So if you have never seen the show before, quick takes is a rapid fire Q&A session with our guest, where we will give you 45 seconds to answer 5 questions, or consecutively 45 seconds each, and we'll get started as soon as Kyron is ready. The production has gone up since we got sponsored. It's new. No.
That's just the same as always been, dude.
It's the same, but it felt better. It felt better this time. All right. So, question number 1. We got 45 seconds on the clock, and I would like to hear your thoughts on which is more important, inspiration or consistency when it comes to making comic books.
You need both. But inspiration's not worth a damn unless you're consistently putting your ass in the chair and doing the work.
I agree. I love it. That only took you 10 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, look, ideas are great, but they're a dime a dozen. It's what you do with the idea that matters.
Agreed. I love that answer. Okay. Question number 2. I want to say I heard you talking about the changing of markets for comics. I want to know, what do you see as the future in comics? Do you see it as Kickstarter or crowdfunding websites like Zoop, or do you think the direct market is still the way to go?
There's no one future. The comics has become increasingly diverse, and is both in terms of the creators telling the stories, the readers consuming the stories, and how we're getting those stories out. So I think that's really the future of comics, is all of it. Crowdfunding, direct market, not so much the newsstand, because that's not really a viable way to do these things as monthlies, but very much, big box stores, Barnes and Noble, that kind of stuff. We're going to tell all kinds of stories across all sorts of formats.
I agree. I love it. Okay. There's I grew up in a time where Ninja Turtles was the biggest thing, Batman, Superman, of course, and then of course anime, Dragon Ball Z and all that stuff. And I'm still nostalgic about that stuff now. I think, a lot of people, as you grow up, you still love the things that you first fell in love with. And, the stuff that happens after that is, whatever. But now we're in a time where people are like, especially movies are really banking on nostalgia. So I want to know your perspective on the comic books, and if we should lean on nostalgia from our past or try to find the next big thing.
Should be both, really. Look, like I'm a generation ahead of you guys, right? So Ninja Turtles doesn't mean a damn thing to me. Either does Transformers or GI Joe, because like I was in high school when that stuff came out, so I was going to cakers and chasing girls. So nostalgia is a powerful thing. I love the stuff that I discovered at 10, 11, 12 years old. But it's not the only thing, right? We need to be producing new material now as well, so that the kids who are 11 and 12 right now can look back in 20 years and fall in love with that stuff. We need to be doing both. We need to, give that nostalgia audience what it wants, but also do new things so that we're feeding the next generation coming in.
Love it. Absolutely. Okay. Question number 4. Which, and I already know the answer to this now that I'm about to ask it. But
I don't know why you gave me this question.
Okay, I'll ask it differently. I was going to ask which one is better, but I'll say, what is the difference in the process of making video games and comic books? What's the biggest difference between the two?
The time is very different. Diablo 4 just came out. I've been working on it personally for 2 years. People on the team have been working on it for 5, 6, 7 years. So it is a long gestation process. Very different from comics. And also comics is a handful of people making the thing and putting it out. Video games, I worked on Diablo with 600 of my closest friends, most of whom I've never met. So it's a huge number of people all pulling together in the same direction to make a thing. And then it ends up being a worldwide phenomenon because it's something that the audience has been waiting for years.
It's huge. Okay, so question number 5, and this is the final one. As most of the people in the audience know, I do another show called Top 5 Live, where we come up with a different top 5 list off the top. Well, not off the top of our heads, but for every week. So what I like to do on this show is ask our guests a top 5 list off the top of their heads. And this week, I want to ask you, what are your top 5 favorite characters that you've ever written for?
Oh, wow. Let's see. I guess I have to say Silver Surfer and Green Lantern because they were so good to me. Witchblade because she was so good to me. Superman because it doesn't get any better than Superman. And probably Darth Vader just because I sort of to go back to the nostalgia thing, that's, I grew up on Star Wars. I discovered Star Wars at just the right age. The fact that I, years later would get to put words in Darth Vader's mouth still boggles my mind.
I love that. I love that answer. And I was telling, I don't know who it was I was telling, but Witchblade is one of those iconic characters too. It's like, even for people who've never read Witchblade before, they know who she is. Like, they know, Witchblade when you see her. So
yeah, I think I've probably written more Witchblade stories than Silver Surfer stories, and probably more than Green Lantern stories. I wrote Witchblade for basically 10 years with a little bit of a break in between. So, and that wasn't, it was just because I found it to be a really good fit. I found it that the series to be a place where I could do any sort of story I wanted to because of the nature of the concept. Mm-hmm. I could do horror, detective, police procedural, science fiction, superhero. Like, I could do any kind of story I wanted. So I never got bored doing the book because I could just go in any direction that I felt like. And
or sounds like it.
And to their credit, Top Cow gave me the ability to go in any direction that I wanted.
Sort of sounds like it allowed you to, like you said earlier, work those writer muscles, do different things on the same series.
Yeah, absolutely. It's and I know that that's not, that's not how every writer approaches what they do. There are a lot of writers that sort of have a lane and they want to stay in it. I just want to write horror stories, or I just want to write the superheroes that I grew up reading, which is totally cool, and that's a valid way to approach your career and your creativity. But it's just not one that I subscribe to.
Nice. Well, if you have a couple more minutes, we have 2 more questions from our audience. Javon says, "Did you enjoy your time at CrossGen?"
Yeah, till the end, till it swirled around the bowl and was gone. But generally, it was a huge learning experience for me, in terms of better understanding the comic making process start to finish, not just my end of it, but seeing how the pencilers approach their particular part of it, and the inkers and the colorists and lettering and production, like all of that stuff. We were responsible for our own books. There were no editors, so the writers basically kind of led the creative teams and supervised what was going on. So I learned a huge amount about making comics, made a lot of friendships, or continued a lot of friendships from the people that I was already had a relationship with, that came there. And I think we made some good comics. I think we made some really good non-superhero comics, which were not that common in the industry at that point. The industry was starting to change and offer a wider variety of material, but it was still, by and large, there was a lot of superhero stuff in those days. So I enjoyed it. I liked being in the same place with the people I was creating with. I like being able to, sit down and, shoot the shit with the creative team on Cyan or The Path, and, kick around ideas and come up with stuff that we wanted to do. It was a very fertile creative place. Business wise, and some of the practices of, that eventually went away, like, being at 9, working 8-hour day, and it's just, that's not how this job works. Sort of, as long as the book gets done, doesn't matter when anybody's showing up in the studio. There were drawbacks and failures on the business side of things, which is one of the reasons it's not here anymore. But overall, it was a very positive experience. I remain very regretful that a lot of people, myself included, got sort of left holding the bag financially for work that we were owed. But those are the pitfalls that you have at any publisher at times. Yeah. So overall it was good. Overall, I would not change it.
Okay. All right. And last question looks like from Dan Bethel. How would you say the writing of comics has changed over time, and how has it been adjusting to or creating that change?
I think comics are certainly, we take longer to tell stories now. The kind of thing that, when Stan and Jack did the Coming of Galactus in 3 issues of Fantastic Four, that would be like a 20-issue maxi series now. So I think in some ways we've probably gone a little bit too far in one direction in terms of letting stories go longer than they need to. But again, that's, when you're suddenly telling a lot more kinds of stories from a lot more kinds of creators, the way you tell those stories is going to change. The way those stories are put in front of the audiences are going to have differences. It's not just superheroes beating the hell out of each other every month. We're doing all sorts of stories, so that demands that you tell those stories in different fashions. To me, the through line that any comic story needs to have is that this is visual storytelling. Give give the artist something cool to draw as often as possible, and therefore you are giving the reader something cool to look at as often as possible. There are certainly times when it's two people, sitting at a coffee table, having a discussion. So part of the job is to figure out, all right, well, how do we make that visual? How do we make that more interesting to look at? And that doesn't mean that there's, that there's a fire next door, and fire trucks are coming in, and you're adding action to a sequence that doesn't need it. It's a question of, all right, how do I make this intimate scene of two characters talking the most visually interesting way to do that? Like what bits of business do I get them to do? Where does the, in terms of working with the artist, like where does the camera go? How do we play this scene? To me, that's always the job, no matter what kind of story you're telling. And it can be, Galactus eating Manhattan, or it can be, two people sitting at the end of a dock having a serious conversation. Just figure out the best way to tell that story visually, and then work with the artist to lean into that, to get something in front of the audience that's visually exciting rather than just a bunch of headshots.
All right, Danny, do you have any other questions for Ron before we let him go?
Well, I got them all in, and we appreciate it, sir. We appreciate you being with us, and we appreciate your work over the years for sure.
Well, thanks, guys. It's a pleasure. I appreciate you letting me drink my coffee, because otherwise I probably wouldn't have been as coherent.
Well, before we let you go, I have one more question.
Sure.
And hopefully it's a quick one for you. But a lot of our audience are people who are making comics as a side hustle or hobby, or they're trying to make comics as a career somehow. Do you have any advice for anybody, whether they're an artist, writer, colorist, or anything like that?
The short version is make comics. The best way to learn how to make comics is to make comics. And I tell people that, that I've that have taken my class, my online class with Jacob Kruger Studio. The best way to learn how to make comics is to make comics. And your first one's going to suck. And your second one's going to suck a little less because you've learned the lessons that you took away from the first one. And your third one will suck less than your second one. You learn by doing in this business, because like I said before, there's a kind of alchemy to this. And you'll finish your first story, and then you'll take a step back and look at it maybe a month or two later, and you'll look back at it and you'll see all the stuff you could have done better. You'll see all the stuff that you would like to fix now. That means you learned something. That means you learned from doing the process. So I think that, again, make comics, bite off a meal that you can chew. Don't decide, well, I'm going to do a 24 issue maxi series of this cosmic empire, and here's the 57 page story Bible with all the characters. Like nobody wants that shit. Like from new creators who are just figuring out what they're doing, just making their name, go make an 8 or 10 page story. Like nice. Do something short, do something that you can get your arms around.
Let's see if PJ is still in the audience. I want to make sure he heard that. And PJ sent me about 100-page document that he was starting with. I'm like, listen, start small. Do something. Do something small first.
Like that's ambitious, but also when you have like 100-page document, that means you're not actually making the story, right? Mm-hmm. That means you're doing research, you're doing background, you're doing everything except making the story. That's the equivalent of standing on the end of the diving board. Mm-hmm. You're sort of near the pool, but you ain't in it. You gotta get in the pool. So all of that stuff is okay, but it's a distraction from actually doing the work. And the work is making the story. So make your 8 or 10 page story and get it finished. Having 15 different series in progress and none of them finished means you got zero. Like, that means you got nothing. Make a thing and finish a thing and then move on to the next one. There's great value in having a finished story, even if it's bad, even if it's your first one and you don't know what you're doing and you're just kind of figuring it out. Having something that's finished, one, allows you to put it out into the world, right? You put it out into the world because of this thing that we're on right now, right? When I broke into comics, this didn't exist. Like, when I broke into comics, you worked for one of the small publishers or Marvel or DC, or you didn't work in comics, or you made it, you made a comic and then, ran it out on a Xerox machine, at school when nobody was looking. Now you can make a comic, and the day after it's finished, you can put it in front of the world, and just sort of beat the bushes and let everybody know that it's there. And then you can make another one, and you can make another one. It has democratized the process hugely. And so when I started, you tried to get picked up by a publisher and hopefully get your work out there. Now that's sort of towards the end of the process, is getting picked up by a publisher. The beginning of the process is just make the thing and put it out. And there are plenty of people making a living on self-publishing their own stuff online, or on one of the online platforms. Their end all and be all is not writing for Marvel or DC, or drawing for Marvel or DC. They just want to do their own thing, and the medium has evolved to the point where you can do that. You can put stuff online, or you put it on Webtoons or Comixology or whatever Comixology is turned into, and just get your material out there. That's the main thing, is make the thing and put it out. And not everybody's going to like it, and that's okay. The main person that has to like what you do is you. If you are satisfied with your story, that's most of the job right there. If you feel like you did the best job you could do at this time, that's what matters. I still tell stories that I want to read. I don't sit here and go, oh man, I wonder what the long-term Silver Surfer audience would like now. I mean, that's just not how I approach the job. Frankly, I don't really care what you guys want. That's the truth. Is and believe me, I live this life because people have responded to my work, and it's wonderful, and I'm extremely thankful for it. But I don't know what you want. I don't know what your tastes are. The only person whose tastes I know and whose sensibilities I can appeal to is me. So 30 years into doing this, I still write stories for me. I write the story that I think I would like to read, and then hopefully the rest of the audience comes along for the ride. Everybody should, to me, that's the best way to approach this stuff, is do the thing that appeals to you, that you are passionate about, and then hope everybody comes along for the ride. And if they do, great. And if they don't, at least you made the story that you wanted to make. And then you can do it again and see what happens the next time. This is a wonderful way to tell stories. But it's still a very personal way to tell stories. Tell the stories that matter to you, rather than the stories that you think will appeal to people.
Right. All right, Ron. Well, this is the end of our show. Like Danny said earlier, we appreciate you being on. This has been a fun show. Like a lot of our guests said, this has probably been a great show. But we want to make sure people get to know you better. So where can people maybe check out you online on social media, or even your website, that we can keep up with you?
Website is ronmarz.com. It's newly refurbished, so it looks a lot better and sleeker and has appearances and all that kind of stuff on it. Thanks to my buddy Truman, who refurbished my website. So ronmarz.com is the website. At Ron Marz is the Twitter account, which is where the updates and all that kind of stuff are. concert pictures from The Cure the other night and that kind of thing. And there's an Instagram account too, but I don't generally maintain that as much as I should. So the main one for the updates of what's the latest and what's coming is Twitter. Despite the hellscape that Twitter is turning into, weed that garden, man. Is at Ron Marz.
All right. Danny, where can people check out your work?
Y'all know me. If you want to find me, our website is fourthwallpros.com. And if you want to find me on social media, it's at the Ace Blade on all social media platforms. Kyron, where can people find you?
You can find me at tauruscomics.com. Check out all my issues we have Saw the Lightning Wielder coming out soon. I know people have asked me about the Kickstarter for that. I'm actually going to push that out to the end of July just because I have a lot of other things going on. I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry to disappoint you so much, Danny. But end of July, mid to end July, we're going to have the Kickstarter for that. And of course, you can check out Taurus Comics on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Taurus Comics. But if this is your first time checking out our podcast, you can go back and listen to previous podcasts at fourtalespodcast.com. That is the number 4, TALES podcast.com. Listen to all past 70, what did I say this was, episode 78, 79. So go listen to the other 78 episodes, please. Listen in. And come back next week where we're going to have the amazing Javon Stokes, friend of the show there, back on the show again. I don't know why he keeps coming back, but he does. But he's going to be on the show again. We're going to talk about, I'm assuming, Heat or Strong or something else that he might have coming up. And after that, we're going to take a little bit of a break for 2 weeks. Danny said he doesn't want to do a show without me, so we're going to take a 2-week break, a little bit hiatus, and then we'll come back strong.
Might do some pre-recorded stuff, maybe. We'll see.
Okay. I'll see what I can whip together. But again, everybody, thank you for showing up. Thank you for being on. Ron Marz, thank you for being on the show. This has been great. But until next time, sayonara, goodbye, and please take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.
I want to know what it is Quick is trying to say.